Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic is here. Good to see you, sir. Where are you going this week?
Headed to Bloomington, Indiana tomorrow. See one of the best stories in college football.
I've Googled him. I've Googled the Indiana Hoosiers.
There's a lot more stuff to Google right now after the way he's won there. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Kurt
Signetti, yes. Family, father was a really successful coach from Pittsburgh. He and his brother really worked their ways up. He's in his early mid-60s, so it's not like he's an overnight sensation. Won big at James Madison. As you said, Google me, and he talked big when he got there, and he is backing it up. It's a team that is built heavily on transfers, many from his old school at James Madison. The other thing that's, I don't want to say it's overshadowed a little bit, but Nebraska's been very good. Year 2 for Matt Rule, and he's got a terrific quarterback who's been as advertised, and that's Dylan Raiola. Excited about our game this weekend.
Yeah, Nebraska and Indiana is a one of those Big Ten games nobody really circled in the beginning of the season, but worthy of watching. I will be definitely tuned into that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's going to get overshadowed by the really huge SEC game with Georgia going to Texas. Obviously, that's the game of the week, but Indiana, Nebraska, just because I think for Nebraska, it's been a long time since they've been decent.
Right.
And they are. And maybe this is the next big step. I mean, they got to surround. I think they got to get Raiola some better skill guys around him, especially a receiver. But he's pretty talented. Like, he's really, really special. And so I think it's a good chance for the country to kind of get a look at him while they're getting a look at the Hoosiers.
That's pretty cool. That's great. And so flying to Indianapolis, take a car? Is that what we're doing?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
So it's actually like we went there last year to Bloomington. I've been there a few times, but it's a really beautiful Big Ten campus.
Dude, you had me at Big Ten. Obviously I'm a Big Ten guy. Bruce Feldman here from Fox Sports and The Athletic, back on the Rich Eisen Show radio network, sitting at the Rich Eisen Show desk, furnished by Grainger with supplies and solutions for every industry. Grainger has the right product for you. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by. Usual Wednesday spot for our friend Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic to talk some college football. Texas just appears to be on an absolute roll and cannot be stopped. And Georgia's coming in this weekend. What is your opinion of what we're seeing out of the Longhorns right now?
They're the one team in the SEC that has been has backed it up. Everybody else has been really shaky. You look at Georgia especially. So they've had issues off the field. They've had them for a little while under Kirby Smart. It feels like they have been significant, though. They're not very good at receiver. Their skill talent, I don't feel like. You not only lose Brock Bowers, you lose Lad McConkey. Those are two go-to guys. I feel like Carson Beck has not been as sharp as he was last year in his first year as a starter. The defense, the run defense, which was great when they were winning national titles and tailed off last year, has tailed off even more this year. They're committing a lot of penalties. They didn't look good when they went to Kentucky. They survived that game. And then they had a week off, and then they went to Alabama, and Alabama was ready for them, jumped all over them, ended up beating them. And they haven't looked that great since. They beat bad teams, and now they're going to play a Texas team. Again, if you look at the rest of the powerhouse teams in the SEC, we thought were going to be good. Georgia struggling around beyond, after the first game against Clemson, they've not been great. Alabama, after the big win against Georgia, bad loss to Vandy, and then just barely survived last week against South Carolina. You look at Tennessee's offense, looks really shaky at best. I mean, they're kind of scuffling around. Ole Miss has been a big disappointment. They lost again last week to LSU. That was a team a lot of us thought was going to be on a playoff. Lane Kiffin's team looked really good against really bad teams, and now that they're in the SEC play, they're struggling. And then, LSU had the loss in the beginning of the year to a USC team that's not great, but they're finding ways to win, and that's a credit to Garrett Nussmeier, who's taken over, and certainly to Brian Kelly and a really good offensive line. But here we are with Texas. Ewers got hurt early on. Arch Manning went in there, played excellent. The defense is very good. The offensive line's very good. They replaced a bunch of receivers with a deeper group of athletes. Tight end's really good.
They look unbeatable right now. They really do.
They look really good. I don't think anybody looks unbeatable. I wouldn't put it out there like that.
So who beats Texas? Who would you give me? Oregon or something like that? Ohio State? Is that what you're saying?
Georgia's capable of beating them. I mean, it's a
Right.
spread within a touchdown. It's just the way Georgia's playing right now. they look like they could lose by 2 touchdowns. But if Georgia has their A game, they can present some problems for Texas. I mean, right now, Texas played an Oklahoma team without a very good offense, and they played a Michigan team in that game where their offense is really bad too. Now Michigan's defense looked bad that day, and that's a credit to Texas, but they haven't played anybody very good on offense so far. So again, I don't want to let's pump the brakes a little bit on Texas. They've looked really good. I think they deserve to be the number 1 team in the country, but they haven't played a team that I think is close to a legit top 10 team. Like Michigan was so one-dimensional on offense. It's just, Texas did what they had to do, but this is a much better quarterback they're going to see than what they saw certainly in Ann Arbor.
Dan Lanning absolutely purposefully put a 12th man on the field to take time off the clock, right?
Yeah, we believe this. Looks like that, yeah.
Right, because he didn't really dispute it.
No, credit to Dan Lanning. He took advantage of the rules. He's a really smart situational guy. That was an A+ showing by his program, all from top to bottom.
Right, and so do you think that is indicative of the long run here? Because I mean, I know Penn State came up with a very nice win here against USC, right? Mm-hmm. And that they feel good about themselves. And your question is how good is USC?
Yeah,
I understand that.
Minnesota took it to them, so yeah.
No, I understand that, but they, coming out here, you're in this crazy world, you're coming from the middle of Pennsylvania, flying out to Los Angeles.
And we've seen a lot of teams. I think the record's like 3-10 or 3-11 of teams traveling 2 time zones. So
we're learning how this is going to work. You know what I mean? In the Big Ten action. So I'm just trying to pay some respects here before I say what I'm about to say. Is that it's just, is this indicative of Oregon coming into a new conference and it's their conference? Do you think that's indicative? This victory?
I think it's indicative of an Oregon team that was really coached up well and took advantage of. They brought their A game. It was a great crowd atmosphere. Dylan Gabriel played his best game. They ran him when they needed to a little more. Right. I thought their offensive line, which had been really shaky in the beginning of the year, did a terrific job. Ohio State's defense, which has been touted quite a bit, was disappointing in that game.
They haven't played anybody really yet.
No, they hadn't. They hadn't. So, but the secondary has legit NFL guys, and Evan Stewart ate them up. He's a former 5-star recruit who went to A&M, and he ended up in Oregon in the portal. Looked really good. They ran the ball really well against Ohio State, better than I think most people would have expected. Ohio State couldn't get any pressure or much pressure. I just thought, if you ask me right now, who do I think is going to win the national title, I'm still picking Ohio State.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there was nothing I saw there was made me go, oh, this team is awful, or this team can't do it. They have the best group of receivers in the country. They have arguably the best 1-2 punch in the backfield. Quarterback's a running threat, and I don't think Will Howard he's nowhere near what C.J. Stroud was, but the talent around him, top to bottom, is better than what C.J. had, especially on defense.
Well, let me give a little pushback here. And by the way, this is coming from my Ohio State friends. Okay, this is not me trolling or anything like that. This is coming from my Buckeye friends. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I can say the words Ohio State. I have no problem with that. Not calling them, Michigan or whatever the hell they call my team. But what about the fact that at the end of this game, timeout in the back pocket, the kids sliding up the middle, this is now by the way, this just in, you can talk to your quarterback in the helmet. What about the fact that at the end of a game, there was a coaching gaffe or a gaffe by the quarterback that a coach either could have stopped, didn't stop, unable to stop, that's just something that's going to come home to roost against someone like Dan Lanning, who's like, I'm going to put a 12th man on the field to try and mess with the situation, or Sark. When it comes down to it, coaching is going to matter.
Sure.
What about that idea?
I think there's definitely something to be said for that. And also Will Howard is not like last year. They had Kyle McCord. I was waiting to see if his eyes would perk up there.
He lit up. He's paying attention.
But it was his first year as a starter. Will Howard, led K-State to a Big 12 title a couple of years ago. He's played a lot of football, but again, they're still college players,
yes,
and
of course,
you would hope if you're an Ohio State fan that the next time that circumstance like that comes up, they will be more dialed in. Again, I don't think losing at the last second to a really good Oregon team on the road means that they wouldn't beat them if they have a rematch someplace else, right? So, I think this is a good test for Ohio State. Again, if they had gone in there and won by 2 touchdowns, I'd probably feel more confident in saying I think they'll win the national title.
Right.
I do think Jim Knowles will get their defense, a little more, again, use the term dialed in, because they have a lot of good players. I think Caleb Downs is a great player, but I talked to an NFL scout this week, and he was like, they don't look like they're playing together very well. And again, maybe that was just the first time that they got taken on the mat.
Because again, you take a look at their schedule, playing somebody, if you will, and this is no slight to Michigan State either, but going on the road, playing Oregon in Oregon for the first time, out on the West Coast for a conference game, that is not the easiest first assignment by any stretch of the imagination. And you could even basically say, Will Howard's not making the mistake in the horseshoe. Things get crazy up in Oregon, I understand. So who are we not talking about that we should be talking about? Like, what's your favorite story that we're not hitting right now?
It's not a sexy story, but it's amazing what is going on with the 2 service academies, Army and Navy.
Yeah.
They are both undefeated in mid-season for the first time since the end of World War II. What is that, 80 years? That's remarkable. They're both in the top 25 for the first time since 1960. Their offenses are extremely potent. I talked to a coach who's actually played both of them, and I was like, okay, what's the, because they do get lumped into, they're recruiting a lot from the same caliber.
Yep.
And Army is more physical, Navy is more creative scheme-wise. And Navy, obviously Ken Niumatalolo did a terrific job, but they tailed off in the last 5 years. They weren't very good the last few years. Now all of a sudden they're really good. Obviously there's going to be a big Army-Navy game at the end there. Who knows if it,
say it, because that would be incredible. That would be incredible if Army-Navy is literally for the 12th spot.
Yeah,
that if we finally I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it, that we expand the college football playoff to 12 teams for the first time, and Army versus Navy becomes a de facto playoff game. Sort of like how, the NFL plays its last regular season game amongst 2 teams whose last regular season game is for a playoff spot. If college football, in this instance, sets things up where it's Army versus Navy for that spot, it's
that
possible,
would be so
right?
much bigger than what you just said, too, just because the idea that these 2 service academies, who, 80 years ago, they were powerhouses. And the sport has changed dramatically since then. But, if you ask me right now, I think Boise State is the best team in that wild card spot, call it for what it is. Ashton Jeanty is a great running back. He is unbelievable.
Right.
He is. I actually do think now, I wouldn't have said this 3 weeks ago, I do think he can win the Heisman Trophy. He's really, really special. I know one of my colleagues, Petros Papadakis, did a Boise game a few weeks ago and talked to Dirk Cutter, who obviously is well-traveled, spent a lot of time in the NFL, and he compared him to one of your colleagues who's, was a great college player and a really good NFL player.
MJD?
Yeah, that's, again, not to go down that the Jeanty tangent, but what I was going to say is, so he's a great player on Boise. I don't think their defense is kind of middle of the pack for the Mountain West. Saying that to get to this point, I don't know who's slowing down him, but I could, if you ask me if they play, I would love to see either one of those teams play Boise to see who's better. Now, Boise has to come out to Vegas in a week or so to play a really prolific offense, and we'll see if they win that game. But that extra spot, again, the 12th spot, is a really fascinating subplot to everything that's going on around college football.
Because Army-Navy's done, usually it's played on a championship weekend.
It's usually played in that time where the Heisman Trophy gets announced.
Correct.
Right? And you sometimes, and I love this as somebody, we all grew up or spent time in the Northeast where you can get snow there, and it just feels way different. And there's been times where they've been really good. This is the odd year where Air Force, Troy Calhoun, terrific coach, been there a long time. This is the year where, like, they were really good last year. They're not good this year. But the other two academies really look outstanding. I mean, Navy really whipped a good Memphis team that has some legit SEC caliber guys on that team on both sides of the ball.
Again, just let's extrapolate this out because this is fun. That, as you point out, like a quaint throwback game that all of us want to feel patriotic and are patriotic about,
yeah.
right? You know what I mean? And becomes an actual de facto winner goes in contest between the two academies in Army and Navy, right? The service academies. And then the winner has to go visit the Horseshoe or has to go visit Oregon, you know what I mean? They'd be the 5 seed, whoever's the runner-up in the Big Ten or the SEC. Like Army at Alabama, right? Navy at Oregon, Navy at Ohio State.
Like, don't you remember? It wasn't that long ago.
Playoff game. Can you imagine if that happens?
You know, like, I want to say both Army and Navy each had, one had Oklahoma, one had Michigan. I remember doing
Army and Michigan. They were set up to win that game.
And there was a series. I want to say it was like from the second quarter where, like, you know, like Michigan didn't get on the field offensively because it was just like going on forever. You know, those are really well coached teams. Obviously, there's a lot of talented athletes who are there, and they're always physical. They're always really good at just grinding people out, and it's hard. You know, you're not going to have months to get ready for them. You might have a couple. You might have 10 days or whatever.
So. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's
obviously there's a lot. There's great. Miles to go between.
So they're both ranked for the first time since October of 1960. Okay, and it's the first time they're both undefeated this late in the year since 1945.
There's your World War II.
There you go.
And I love it. It's so fun. It's great. And who's ranked right in between them?
Michigan. How are they still ranked, Bruce? Come on, what are we doing?
You could say it. It is. I don't know, because they're the defending champs.
But that was last year.
I know that.
Those guys are in the NFL now. Like, I'm not going to get like all worked up over who's in the 20s, but he does have a fair point, right?
Well, Michigan at Illinois, coming off a bye.
You have two fringe top 25 teams. One's like, you know, whatever, 22, 24, or whatever that is. Illinois almost lost to a really bad Purdue team.
I know.
Freshman quarterback.
I know that. And so, real quick, Heisman frontrunner, middle of October, literally middle of October is...
I think it's Ashton Jeanty. I mean...
Really do?
Yeah, like, I still think Travis Hunter's in there. It's good to hear that, you know, Deion says he's going to play this weekend. His shoulder got banged up. He didn't play much last week.
I mean, I know they lost to Kansas State, but Shedeur looked terrific. I mean... Yeah,
I don't know. Like, Shedor's, you know, I think he's a really good quarterback. I think the Heisman guy there is Travis Hunter, to be honest. You know, the quarterbacks to watch, Cam Ward at Miami, they're still rolling. He's made a huge difference on that program. I think he will be around this Heisman race. And usually those guys at the big programs, if they keep winning, tend to leapfrog the stories we like at this time of year.
What about Ewers? Did him getting hurt?
You know, this is a game which will, like, he was fine. You know, he looked a little rusty coming back against Oklahoma. Oklahoma's defense is good. Their offense is bad. But this is a chance for Ewers to surge up, you know, there. I mean, you have a Tennessee-Alabama game, which is still, people are going to watch it. And you have Jalen Milroe, who has been really, really good. And I think they still have a puncher's chance. I think Dylan Gabriel stepped into the race last week with how he did.
Vanderbilt beating Alabama is the biggest shocker of the season so far?
You want to say Diego Pavia's in there? Or?
No, I'm just throwing out what you know, just throwing one more out at you.
Yeah, I mean,
Vandy beating Alabama is the shocker of the season.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois is up there.
It's up there. Yep.
But I think what kind of muted that a little bit is Notre Dame lost to Marshall a few years ago, and I think it was like, okay, you know, Notre Dame's a good team, but they're still, their margin for error feels like it's not as big as Alabama's normally does. But I think that the game you're talking about is a credit. Clark Lee has built that. He lost some good players in the portal, and he got a really terrific leader in Pavia, who is, you know, it's crazy because you mentioned Ewers, I mentioned Milroe. You know, people thought about Carson Beck in there, Jackson Dart, and
Great name.
You might have Diego Pavia, the guy from New Mexico, the wrestler from New Mexico State, might be the MVP of the SEC in the first half of the season.
Bruce, real quick, if you're Travis Hunter, the injury last week, would you think about just sitting out the rest of the season? Like every mock draft has him first, second, third overall. Like why risk it?
I hate to answer it this way, but asking me to be Travis Hunter or you to be Travis Hunter or any one of the five of us is kind of preposterous, just because I think he is like the stuff he does, it's like asking me to read a foreign language. I just think he's wired so differently, like the competitiveness and everything else. Yeah, as older people, as we all are, I could see us saying, oh, yeah, the money's on the back end of it. But also, if you're him, you were the #1 recruit in the country. You chose to go to Jackson State to go play for Deion Sanders. You knew you weren't winning a national title there. You chose to follow Deion to Colorado. You probably knew the odds of it's a big deal, I think, if they go to a bowl game and if they go to a decent bowl game. That's still out there. I think there's also the opportunity for him to still win the Heisman. I mean, say what we just said about Jeanty, like he needs a lot of stuff to break right for him. If Travis Hunter ends up doing more Travis Hunter stuff and they win 8 or 9 games on their top 25 team, I think Travis Hunter ends up like, if Jeanty runs for 3,000 yards and they go to a playoff, maybe. But again, and I get it. I'm sure there's a big insurance policy that Travis Hunter has, but I don't know.
I'm with you, though. It is. I'm with you in two things that you hit on. First of all, how can you put anybody in his shoes, right? Because of what he's done and what he does. I just think Deion has built a unicorn or shepherded a unicorn, nurtured a unicorn who has a competitive streak in him that I don't think I don't know him from Adam. I just say he's got a competitive streak in him where he's not tapping out.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. No, look, there's great players. I mean, I think this is different than Fournette and Christian McCaffrey when they decided not to play in bowl games. Yes. Obviously, those guys are high level football talents and competitors, but
I'm with you. It just doesn't sound. It doesn't.
I don't mean to be dismissive of your question.
No, of course not. I mean,
I don't think it's an illegitimate question. I don't think that's an illegitimate question. It's just like any question you have about anybody who's that talented. Wants to keep himself ready. But we're in the middle of October. I don't know. There's still miles to go right there. Have a good time in Bloomington.
Thank you.
And look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.